Hi, I'm Grant Rodiek. I am a tabletop game designer and owner of a small publishing company called Hyperbole Games. Today we're going to do a rules replacement video for Farmageddon Farm Fresh Edition. This game has been just sent to the manufacturers, and so today I'm going to show you how to play the game without reading the rules. The cards I'm using are from Drive-Thru Cards, so while they have the final illustrations and the final layout, the border is a little bit thicker. There's some miscut on the cards, so this is think of this as a Final Fantasy prototype, and it's almost indicative of what the final one would look like, but the final one will have nicer cards, a little bit different proportions, linen finish, all that good stuff. So let's learn how to play. The game of Farmageddon is won by the player who has the most money at the end of the game. You'll see that the crop cards have money in the top corner of varying amounts. This one's 7, this one's 15. There are also some farmer cards that can increase or decrease the amount of money you earn. The game ends when the crop deck runs out, and we'll go over that specifically, but essentially your goal is to make the most money and do so by the time the crop deck is over. The game usually takes 20 minutes, I'd say, for experienced players and about 30 minutes for newer players. Farmageddon Farm Fresh comes with 106 cards, and then there are also 2 promo cards. The cards are easy to distinguish. There's a reference card. You see the crop cards with the crop back, and they have a crop on the front with a little crop planter icon here, as well as sort of a green outline. And then you have the farmer cards with the barn on the back, and they have sort of a bluish hue, and they all have a little sign in the top left corner that gives you reminder icons and such. So to start the game, you're going to shuffle the farmer card deck, and as indicated by the top of the reference card, you're going to deal 4 cards to every player, and then you're going to set those farmer cards off to the side over here. So we'll just set that up there. And then for the crop cards, you're going to shuffle them as well, and you're going to deal, here's this person's cards, and you're going to deal 3 cards to every player. There's 45 farmer cards, and there's 60 crop cards. 40 of the crops are normal crops, and 20 of them are Franken crops. So we're going to do 1, 2, 3. So now we have 7 cards each, and we're ready to go. One quick side note is that in a 2-player game, you randomly remove 20 cards from the crop deck. That just shortens the game a little bit and makes sure it doesn't overstay its welcome. So let's walk through the turn order. The game of Farmageddon is played in turns. I'm going to talk about the turn at a high level, and then I'm going to go into details on all of the actions. So the reference card here walks you through what you're going to do. So the first thing you're going to do on every turn is you're going to draw 2 crop cards. So here's our crop card deck, so we would draw 2. You can then take actions. You can do fertilize, which is a crop action where you have to do that at least once, but otherwise there's no limit to the amount of times you can do that. You can play farmer cards, which is a maximum of 2 on your turn, and then you can place any number of plant any number of crop cards, which you'll fertilize. At the end of your turn, you're going to draw 1 farmer card, and the key to this is that you'll always have crops to play with, and you'll always have farmer cards to play with. You harvest any crops that are fully fertilized out in front of you, and I'll explain that more in just a second. And then finally, you discard down to 6 crop cards. There's no limit on the number of farmer cards you can have, but you cannot hoard crop cards. You basically need to be planting them and fertilizing with them. So let's go into greater details on what it means to plant, fertilize, and play farmer cards. Planting is going to be the most common action you take in the game. Planting revolves around crop cards that you own from your hand. You'll notice that every crop card has an amount of money that's earned, which are points, when they're harvested, as well as a fertilizer requirement, which is that there. And then they have a little symbol. This is the crop symbol. This is the Franken crop symbol. So to plant a crop, you take any crop from your hand and you place it face up in front of you. And you could do that as many times as you want. So I could say, plant these 2 sassy wheats. Now, there are also some Franken crops, which have special text that when you plant it, you get something. And some of them have other things. But this bodacious broccoli, I get to draw a crop card when I'm planted. So I would plant her, and then I get to immediately draw a crop card. Some of the other ones have conditions that when you fertilize, in the case of both of these. So now let's talk about fertilization. That's planting. These crops, if you notice here, have a fertilizer requirement on them. This one is 1, and then the bodacious broccoli is 3. Typically, the more valuable a crop, the more fertilizer it requires. To fertilize, you could take any crop card, and you know what a crop card is by its back and also by the greenish hue on the front. You see the green. You could take any crop card and you play it face down on top of any crop. So here, we fertilized a sassy wheat. And you notice in the top left corner, it has that fertilizer symbol. So now this crop is fully fertilized. It requires one, and we fertilized it once. You can harvest crops at the end of your turn. However, they need to be fully fertilized, so this one is. However, not on the turn they were planted. That means that I cannot plant a crop and harvest it on the same turn. If my opponent takes a turn and then it comes back to me, I will then harvest this sassy wheat at the end of my turn automatically. There are some other conditions that can modify that, and we will get to those as we see it. Now, for the example of this helpful tater, let's say my opponent here has this zombo weed planted in her area. The helpful tater notes that if I play this as a fertilizer, I can draw 2 crop cards or 1 farmer card. You can fertilize your opponent's crops. So I will fertilize that, and then I can either draw those 2 crop cards or 1 farmer card. And we'll go ahead and take that farmer card. Something that's really important to remember. You notice here it says fertilize minimum 1, but no limit otherwise. I have to fertilize once per turn if able. Now that means if I plant all my crop cards and I have no crop cards left in my hand to use as fertilizer, well then that is where the if able comes from. However, I can't sit back, not plant anything, and if I have crop cards, not fertilize something. This is sort of a subtle mechanism to force you to plant stuff, because if you don't fertilize your own stuff, you will have to fertilize an opponent's stuff, and not all the cards have a benefit for doing so. So this naturally forces you to plant and fertilize. Now, the action cards are really the meat of the game. You can only play 2 of these per turn, and wow, I have a lot of foul manure. I have 4 foul manures. I have 4 of the 5 in the deck. So let's draw a couple more of these. So these cards, you can only play 2 on your turn, and they will do all sorts of activities. I'm not going to go through all of them, but they can do things like, for example, the foul manure will protect your crop, which means that people can't steal it or destroy it or even affect it in any way. However, it costs 2 additional fertilizer. And so you could put this here, and you notice that now it has the protection symbol, but also the +2 fertilizer symbol. You have cards like Thresher, which kills a crop, but then its owner gets the fertilizer back. So I could thresh, for example, this zombo weed, and then they would get that fertilizer back. And in fact, zombo weed has a power that would modify this further. You have the darn gophers, which allow you to take cards off the top, or crop insurance, which means you get money even if it's destroyed. This is a really great one to play with, for example, the sassy wheat, because sassy wheat's only worth 4 normally, but it's worth 6 if you destroy it, and therefore you might want to destroy it yourself because you'll get a bigger payday from the crop and save crop cards you didn't use to fertilize it. So you're going to read what these action cards do, these farmer actions, and you can only play 2 of them on your turn. Now, something that's really key to note, you can plant, fertilize, and use your farmer actions in any order. So I can start my turn with a farmer action, then I can plant a card, then I can fertilize, then I can use another farmer action. So you could basically do these in any order, and that's where the game has a little bit of complexity, but that's also where a lot of the fun comes from. So we planted, we fertilized. It's the end of my turn, and because I planted this on my turn, I can't harvest it. But let's say I planted this on a previous turn. At the end of my turn, I would just discard the crop card, and I would take this sassy wheat and I would put it face down in my harvest pile. That's secret information. At the end of the game, I could check it, and I would compare the value of all of that. So that is effectively how a turn works. A quick change of scenery here for the final note. The game ends when the crop deck runs out. So if at the start of their turn, when they draw their 2 crop cards, a player draws the last crop cards, that is their last turn, and then every other player gets 1 final turn. Now, let's say a player draws the 2 crop cards at the start of their turns, and then using Bodacious Broccoli to draw 1 crop card, or Farm Futures, a farmer card, to draw 2 crop cards, that also triggers the end. And again, that is their last turn, and then every other player gets 1 final turn. Once all players have finished the game, any crops that are fully fertilized are harvested. So even though on the very last player's turn they may have planted and then fully fertilized, it's just at the end of the game to make sure that people have value in their final crops. Any crops that survive and are fully fertilized are automatically harvested and added into their player's score pile. So the game ends when the crop deck runs out. That's that player's last turn, and then every other player gets 1 final turn, and then at the very end of the game there's sort of 1 final auto harvest. Now, Farmageddon is really a pretty simple game. We've basically covered the meat of it right now. Just for some clarification, There's no limit to the number of franking crops you can play. They have powerful bonuses, and so if you have 3 franking crops in your hand, you can plant and trigger all of their abilities without limit. So where the farmer cards have 2, a limit of 2 that you can play any number of franking crops. Those are just meant to be fun bonuses that pop in. A key term I want to tell you guys about is protection. Protection is when you'll see this symbol, well, it's looking at me, so here we go. As when you have that symbol there, protection means that literally nothing can affect the crop. You can harvest it and you can fertilize it just as normal, but you cannot affect it with franking crops. You cannot affect it with farmer cards. Those are good or bad ones. So if your crop is protected, you're basically trading off the fact that it cannot be harmed with the fact that you have no way to improve it with other farmer cards. So it's that trade-off you want to deal with. That's really the meat of the game. There's a key term which is clear, which is that you remove the crop and any cards on it. There's a key term which is ownership, and ownership means that you own the crop and any cards on it. That's farmer and fertilizer cards. So if you steal a crop, you steal everything that comes with it. There's a key term which is score, which is mean you place that card or that crop in your harvest pile, and those are where your points come from. But really, that's the entire game. Thanks.